There's one. Set for stun.
Welcome back to Propology 101. And today, we are going to be talking about this wonderfully beautiful, amazing piece of industrial art. We're going to be talking about the ANH E-11. Now, the ANH E-11 comes in many different shapes and forms, but this one is kitted out to the max. This is the full kit out for the E-11 from A New Hope. This is most well seen in the opening scenes of the movie, especially when Princess Leia is being marched down the hall by Stormtroopers. You get a really good look at the blaster, and you can see the wires, the counterbox, power cell, tubes, and everything. You can see everything wonderfully. Now, this blaster is based on the Sterling submachine gun. I know we've talked a lot about the Sterling submachine gun, but we've never seen it or talked about it in its complete form. The E-11 is basically a complete Sterling submachine gun with a couple Greeblies thrown on it to turn it into the E-11. And we're going to talk about all those pieces used to convert this to the E-11. Right off the bat, we'll talk about some of the modifications that were done to the actual Sterling equipment, most notably the magazine. The magazine is a standard 34-round magazine cut down to be a 10-round magazine for filming. To do that, it's actually very easy. You don't cut down from the gun side, you cut from the far outside. You bring it down and then rebend the flange, put the lid on and cut down the spring, then put the feed roller in, and you're all done. You have a shortened magazine that functions wonderfully. Now, the Sterling submachine gun was created during World War II and actually saw service at the end of World War II. And part of that service got it in the running to be the next submachine gun that was going to be adopted by the British government. But for whatever reason, they thought, maybe we can improve on the Sterling submachine gun, and started a trial process where other weapons manufacturers started creating submachine guns going after that goal of being the next officially adopted submachine gun by the British government. Now, those trials went on from basically somewhere around 1947 on to about 1953 or 54. And funny enough, one of the competitors was the BSA submachine gun, which we've talked about because it was a direct influence on the creation of the DH-17. By the end of the trials, basically, the Sterling won out. It was by far the best one all the way through the trials, and like I said, it actually saw combat use in World War II, which also gave it a leg up. So anyway, let's get down to really what makes the E-11 an E-11. And first thing we're going to talk about are the scopes. The scope that is on this particular one is the M38 scope from 1942. This is in the same family as the M19 scope. There's about 5 or 6 different scopes that were used, but the real ones that everybody looks out for is the M38. In A New Hope, your blaster or an E-11 would be totally accurate with an M19 scope on it. It would be, as a matter of fact, the Stormtrooper that stunned Princess Leia, his E-11 had an M19 scope on it, which is the same scope that is on the DL-44s. Since this is a hero, or a copy of a hero, and most of the blasters used would be considered a hero, meaning it was built on a fully functional Sterling frame or a fully functioning Sterling submachine gun. Even the Stormtroopers had Sterling submachine guns. Since that's what they were using, you couldn't quite drill holes in it and mount a scope rail to put the scopes on. So what they actually did is they cut a steel bar, flat stock, they bent it and then cut it with a T-slot at this end on the 90-degree bend so it would drop in the last vent hole, and then you pull it back and it would lock in to the tube, and then it was fixed back at the rear sight where it wasn't going to be causing any interference with the travel of the bolt. Mounted off the side of the scope mount is a Hengstler counterbox 400. These are industrial counters. These things would be hooked up to a press that stamps out sheet metal parts. Boom, boom, boom. And every time it stamps a part, this would count that part, and you would be able to see how many were done in a shift or a certain time period. The tubes, on the other hand, mounted on top of the magazine well, are what's traditionally called the power cells, or the tubes. These things are kind of cool, and basically it's made up of fuses and capacitors and some other stuff like that. But this is an interesting piece. Nobody really understands or knows the true source of where these things came out. There's a piece of electronic equipment, and you can tell if you study this piece, we don't know what it is. It's the guts of something. And they had a lot of them because they were used a lot in A New Hope. The open part of the hood on Luke's speeder, where there's this stuff in the middle, like hoses coming in and out, and you had these pieces with these little nodules sticking up and everything. That's actually the source of the power cells on the E-11. Basically what they did is they took this thing and chopped it up and took it frame and all. So the part that held in these fuses and the capacitors and all that stuff, that section was removed and chopped up, and then they just plopped them on the E-11. It has capacitors, wires, and so that's what they used. And they actually came out of that device in a few different shapes and styles. I think there's maybe as many as 5 or 6 different variations of the tubes. They weren't made separately by production. They were just chopped out, and they were used as, as a greebly that was just basically harvested from this piece of old electronics. And this is a tube style electronics. It may even possibly be some sort of a military electronics. Nobody really knows the source. Oh, another use for these innards of this device, whatever it was, the top of the mouse droid has this also as part of what decorates the top of the mouse droid. This thing's been chopped up and stuck on there. And I think it was used in a few other places in Star Wars. I'm not 100% sure where, but I know it was used a lot. And they had a lot of these, but no one knows what the source of it originally was. It could have been some old military equipment, some sort of old industrial. Heck, it could have been some sort of part of an old vacuum tube computer. We just don't know. But the tube assemblies came out complete from this device, and it would be just like a rack of them this long on an angled piece of steel. And they were just zing, cut, 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 cut. And they were just taking the groupings of 2 fuses with resistors in the middle, cut that, and then they all had a little bit different shapes because they were sitting vertically and they were shaped to clearance vacuum tubes and other components that were plugged into this device. So that's why there are so many different variations of the power cells, because they were just shaped a little bit different to clearance on the inside of this electronic piece. Then, of course, they connected between the counterbox and the tubes or the resistor with wires. There are, like the scopes, different scopes and different layouts. There are different layouts of the E-11. Some will have no counterbox and no wires, but still have tubes. For example, Han Solo's E-11 that he carried on the Death Star, it had no counterbox, but it had a set of tubes. So you could see these with tubes, with counterbox, no wires. You'll see it with counterbox, no tubes. You see the E-11 in all kinds of different configurations. Now, moving to the front of the blaster are these T-rails. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 T-rails. The source of these were a little bit of a mystery for a while, but what people believed these were windshield wiper blades off of a British car. That kind of lends to their ability to be bent and stuck down in here, and they probably tried to attach them the best they could with rubber cement. They're just glued on, and you can see instances where some have fallen off or are in the process of lifting and coming off. But anyway, now that is just about everything they use to make up the E-11 from A New Hope. Now, we're going to be covering E-11s in A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. We're going to do another E-11 on A New Hope next week, and that is the Stormtrooper E-11, one of my favorite costumes of all time. There's nothing better than a dirty Stormtrooper, if you ask me. Join us next time when we pull out another E-11 and talk about what it's made of.